They say the moon goddess never abandons her children, that no wolf, however lowly, however flawed, is ever cast beyond her light. Zara had believed that. With every bruise she hid, every insult she swallowed, every night she spent curled on a stone floor, while her pack slept warm above her. She had held that belief like a coin pressed against a wound. She sees you, she had told herself. She has not forgotten you. The night they dragged her to the border and threw her across it like something spoiled, something shameful, something that had never deserved to belong. She felt the coin slip through her fingers. The rogue lands did not welcome her. They did not welcome anyone. They were the edges of the world that wolves spoke of in low voices, the place where the exiled went and were never spoken of again. Not because they died, though many did, but because the pack needed to believe they had never existed at all. Zara existed. Bleeding, barefoot, stripped of her rank and her name, and the thin dignity she had fought her whole life to keep, she existed. She did not know, as she dragged herself deeper into the dark between the trees, that something ancient lived in those lands. Something that had been watching the borders for a long time. Two somethings, bound by blood and fury and a rage the civilized packs feared to name. She did not know that exile had not been her ending. It had been a door. The exile did not begin at the border. It began the morning. Elder Kale read the Bloodline record aloud in the great hall, his voice carrying the particular flatness of a man performing cruelty he had rehearsed. Zara of the Ashveil pack. He did not look up from the parchment. Daughter of Marin, who was daughter of Sorel, whose bloodline has been confirmed upon final review to carry the rogue strain. The hall had been full. That was the part Zara would never be able to forget, no matter how many cold nights in the rogue lands eventually buried it. The hall had been full, and the silence that followed Elder Kale's words was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a pack that had already decided and was simply waiting for the announcement to make it official. She had been standing at the center of the hall. They had told her it was a routine bloodline confirmation, one of the quarterly checks the Ashveil Alpha required of all unmated wolves under 30. She had worn her cleanest clothes. She had arrived early, because arriving early was one of the small disciplines she had built her life around. The belief that if she was diligent enough, careful enough, invisible in the right ways, and present in the right ways, the pack would eventually see her as one of their own. She understood now, standing in the wreckage of that belief, that she had never been one of their own. She had simply been useful enough to keep. The rogue strain is a contamination of the bloodline, Elder Kale continued, setting the parchment down and folding his hands with the practice and solemnity of a man who enjoyed this part. It predisposes the wolf to severed pack bonds, to instability, to an affinity for rogue energies that poses a direct threat to the integrity of our territory and our people. Under Ashveil law, a wolf confirmed to carry the rogue strain cannot remain within pack borders. Zara's hands were very still at her sides. She had learned stillness young. It was the first survival tool she had ever mastered, the ability to make her body a closed door while everything behind it burned. Alpha Renwick. Elder Kale turned to the head of the hall. Alpha Renwick had not looked at her once since she entered. He was looking at his hands now, folded on the arms of his chair, and Zara understood in that moment that the Alpha's refusal to meet her eyes was not indifference. It was the specific cowardice of a man who had already signed the order and did not want to watch it carried out. She had served this pack for 23 years. She had worked the medicine stores, cataloged the healer's inventory, sat with the elderly wolves when no one else would, woken before dawn to help the kitchen women on feast days. She had never missed a pack muster. She had never been late. She had never once asked for more than she was given. She had believed in some quiet and stubborn corner of herself that this would count for something. "The sentence is exile," Alpha Renwick said. His voice was very flat. Immediate and permanent. The hall did not stir, not one voice, not one wolf. Zara looked out at the faces she had known her entire life, the women she had brought broth to when they were sick, the children she had helped with their shift training, the elders she had carried firewood for through 3 winters, and she read in each face the same expression. Not cruelty, most of them, something worse, relief. The relief of a pack that had privately worried about her for years and was now being told officially that their worry had been justified, that she had always been the problem they suspected. Only one face was different. Beta Saren, third in the pack hierarchy, stood at the edge of the assembled wolves with an expression that was not relief and not sorrow and not the blank, careful nothing that the others wore. It was satisfaction, the small, private satisfaction of someone watching a long plan arrive at its conclusion. Zara filed that face away. She did not know yet what she would do with it. But she filed it away because she had survived this pack by being the kind of person who noticed things and held them carefully and waited. They gave her 10 minutes to collect her belongings. A guard stood the door of the small room she had been given, not unkindly, just present, as if she might run, while she gathered what she could carry: a blanket, a knife, the small leather pouch of dried herbs she kept by her bed out of old habit from her years in the medicine stores, a pair of boots that were not quite broken in yet. She did not take the embroidered cloth her mother had left her. She did not take it because it had been folded at the bottom of her chest for years like a prayer she had stopped being able to make herself say, and she did not think she could carry its weight alongside everything else. She would regret leaving it. Later in the dark, she would regret it, but she left it. The walk to the border was not long. It felt long. The guard who escorted her, 2 of them, young wolves who would not meet her eyes, walked close but not touching, as if she were already a contamination they were managing, rather than a person they were removing. The pack thinned out as they moved through the territory, the trees growing older and further apart, the path beneath her feet changing from packed earth to frost-hardened ground. At the border, Elder Kale was waiting. He had a small ceremonial knife. Pack tradition required a bloodline mark be made at the border for a formal exile, a cut on the palm and a drop of blood into the earth, severing the territorial bond officially. He held his hand out for hers. Zara gave it to him. She watched him make the cut. She watched her blood fall onto the frozen ground and felt for just a moment something in her chest give way. A warmth she had not known was still there, guttering out like a candle in wind. Her pack bond, small as it had always been, neglected as it had still been there. A thread. Now it was not. Elder Kale stepped back, the guard stepped back. The border was behind her. "You may not return," Elder Kale said. "The moon goddess protect you." It was the traditional farewell, ritual words. He said them the way a man reads a weather report. Because they were required, not because he meant them. Zara turned and walked into the rogue lands. She did not look back. Not because she was not afraid. She was afraid in a way that lived in her stomach, like swallowed glass, but because there was nothing behind her worth the turned head. The trees here were older. She felt it immediately, the way the quality of the air changed, grew heavier, filled with a green dark cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. The rogue lands were not simply unoccupied territory. They were territory that had been refused, generation after generation, by every pack that bordered them. There were stories about why. She had grown up on those stories. Savage wolves who had lost reason. Twin warlords who had claimed the rogue lands 2 decades ago and held them against every attempt at absorption. A darkness in the soil that unmade ordinary wolves. She had always thought the stories were pack politics, a way of keeping wolves from straying. Now, 20 minutes into the rogue lands with darkness falling and her palm still bleeding, she was less certain. She walked until her legs began to shake, and then she walked further, because stopping felt like surrender. The cold was becoming serious. The blanket she had thrown over her shoulders was not enough for this. She had not thought to take her heavier coat, had not thought at all beyond move. Keep moving. And her boots were rubbing the wrong way, and there was a particular silence in these woods that was not peaceful. It was the silence of something large holding very still. Zara stopped. She stood in a small clearing between 4 enormous oaks, her breath coming in pale clouds, blood drying on her palm, and she looked up at the sky. Dark. No moon yet. Or if the moon was there, the canopy was too dense to see it. She sees you, she had told herself, for 23 years. She has not forgotten you. For the first time, Zara did not say it. She crouched instead, pressing her uncut hand flat against the cold earth, and she said nothing at all. She breathed. She listened to the heavy silence of the rogue lands pressing in from every direction, and from somewhere deep in the dark, between the trees, something breathed back. Not an animal, not the wind. Something deliberate, something that had been watching her for longer than she realized. Zara did not move. Her hand stayed flat against the earth. And then the breathing was gone, as if it had simply decided to let her go. For now. She made herself a shelter from broken branches and her blanket in the hollow between two of the oaks. She lay down in the dark with her knife against her chest and her eyes open and her mind very quiet. She did not sleep, but she existed, and whatever was out there in the dark knew it. She found the river by sound before she found it by sight. It was moving water, fast, cold, cutting through the dark of the rogue lands with an indifference that Zara found strangely comforting. Water did not care about bloodlines. It did not hold pack meetings or read parchment records aloud in full halls. It simply moved and kept moving and wore down whatever stood in its way. She followed it. Dawn had come gray and reluctant, the light filtering through the canopy in thin strips that did not so much illuminate the forest as remind it that the sun still existed. Zara had risen from her hollow before the light fully arrived, because lying still gave her mind too much room, and her mind, left alone, kept returning to the same locked door, the hall, the silence, Beta Saren's face. She could not afford that door yet. She needed water and food, and to understand the geography of a land that would kill her just as efficiently as her old pack had if she let it. The river was narrow but fierce, running over smooth, dark stones. She drank from it carefully, crouching upstream from a fallen log, watching for movement on both banks before she lowered her head. The water was the coldest thing she had ever tasted. It moved through her like a verdict. She was washing the dried blood from her palm when she heard him. Not footsteps. She heard nothing as crude as footsteps. What she heard was the absence of bird sound. The forest had been producing a thin, cautious bird song since first light. Small things moving high in the canopy, uncertain but present. And then, between one breath and the next, they stopped. Something large was close. Zara straightened slowly. She did not reach for her knife, which was tucked at her hip. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she understood instinctively that reaching for the knife would be interpreted as an intention, and she did not yet know what she was dealing with. She turned. He was standing at the tree line on the opposite bank, 20 feet away, perhaps less. He was wearing no pack colors, no rank markings, just dark clothing that had seen hard use, and a stillness so complete that she could not determine how long he had been there. Long enough that the birds had already adjusted to his presence before she noticed him. Long enough to have watched her drink and wash her wound and straighten up. She had grown up hearing about the twin warlords of the rogue lands. Every pack within 3 territories had their own version of the story, and the versions disagreed on almost every detail. Their ages, their history, the precise nature of the violence they were capable of, but they agreed on one thing. The twins were not like other alphas. They had not inherited their power through bloodline succession or challenge rights. They had taken the rogue lands, carved them out of nothing with their bare hands over a decade of fighting that the civilized packs had watched from a safe distance with a mixture of horror and relief that it was not being directed at them. Looking at him now, Zara believed it. He was not the largest wolf she had ever seen. She had known larger, older alphas built like siege weapons. But there was something about the quality of his presence that size alone did not account for. He occupied space differently than other people, as if gravity operated with more commitment in his vicinity. His eyes were the particular pale gray of ice over deep water, and they were fixed on her with an attention so absolute and so still that Zara's first instinct, trained by 23 years of pack survival, was to lower her gaze. She didn't. She didn't know why she didn't. It was not bravado. It was something older than that, something that rose from wherever the last of her had settled after last night, the part of her that had laid in the dark with a knife on her chest and decided, without language, that she had already been reduced as far as she was willing to go. She met his eyes. The silence between them was enormous, his head tilted. Not much. A degree, perhaps 2. The movement of a creature recalibrating something it had not expected to encounter. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice was low. Not gentle. Nothing about him suggested gentleness as a natural condition. But low in a way that did not carry threat. It carried observation. Pure and flat and stripped of performance. "Yesterday," Zara said. "It's already closed. Pack exile mark." It was not a question. She did not treat it as one. "Yes." He looked at her for another long moment. Then he moved, and the movement was so swift and so fluid that her body registered it before her mind did, a cold spike of animal alertness that she suppressed immediately. He crossed the river in 2 steps, boots finding the stones without looking, and came to stand on her bank. Close, closer than she had braced for, he was looking at her palm. She opened it without being asked. She didn't examine that instinct, didn't have time to, and he looked at the shallow cut Elder Kale had made. Clean, already knitting. He did not touch her hand. He looked at the cut the way a man looks at a document, reading something from it that she could not see. Ashveil, he said. You know the mark. I know all the border marks. He released her hand, though he had not touched it, and stepped back to a more navigable distance. Something in his posture had shifted. The absolute stillness was still there, but it had changed quality, predatory, not warmer, precisely. More considered. How long have you been in the Roguelands? Since last night. You survived last night alone, I did. Something moved across his face. It was brief and she nearly missed it. The tiniest fracture in the ice water composure, there and gone. She catalogued it carefully and said nothing. Come, he said and turned back toward the tree line. Zara did not move. Where? He stopped. He looked back at her over his shoulder, and she had the distinct sense that this, being asked where, was not something that happened to him with great frequency. Somewhere warmer than here, he said, with food, and if I choose not to come, the pause was very brief, then you stay here. The Rogue Lands will make the choice for you within 2 days. He held her gaze. But you already know that. You're not asking because you're considering refusing. You're asking because you need to know you still can. Zara looked at him for a long moment. He was right. She hated that he was right. She filed that away too. The fact that he had read her correctly and had chosen to say it plainly rather than use it. That was not the behavior of a man who needed leverage over her. That was the behavior of a man who simply did not see the point of pretending. She followed him. They walked for nearly an hour without speaking. He moved through the Roguelands the way water moved through a landscape, not forcing anything, simply finding the path of least resistance with a precision that spoke of years rather than instinct alone. He knew every route, every hollow, every place where the ground looked firm and was not. He did not warn her about any of them, but she noticed that he slowed, almost imperceptibly at each one, as if giving her time to see what he had already seen. She kept pace. He noted it. She saw him note it, the same fractional recalibration she had observed at the river, but he said nothing. The stronghold announced itself before it was visible. The forest changed first. The trees became taller, older, more deliberate in their spacing, as if they had been growing with an awareness of the structure they surrounded. Then the smell reached her. Smoke, pine resin, iron, something that was wild but not feral. Controlled wildness. A whole community of wolves who had chosen the Roguelands and made it hold. Then the gates. They were not what she had pictured. Pack strongholds, in her experience, were functional. Walls built for defense, timber and stone utilitarian. These gates were also built for defense, undeniably. The timber was black with treatment, and the iron braces were serious work. But they were tall, taller than necessary. The kind of tall that said, we built this knowing that whatever came against it would need to look up. The wolves at the gate saw her Asorcoat and stood aside without a word. Their eyes went to her. She was clearly not expected, and she read in those eyes the same quick assessment she had already learned to expect. Exile mark on the palm, no pack colors, female, alone. Then their eyes went back to the man beside her, and all expression was carefully, professionally removed. Inside, the stronghold was larger than she had anticipated. Not a camp, a settlement. Permanent structures, cook fires, wolves moving with purpose in the cold morning air, children even, in small clusters near the inner buildings. Zara had not imagined children in the Roguelands. She did not know why, perhaps because the stories had been so relentlessly about savagery and war that they had left no room for ordinary life. But children required ordinary life. Children required someone believing that tomorrow was worth building toward. She was still absorbing this when the door of the largest building opened, and he stepped out. Him. And not him. She understood immediately, the fact of twins landing in her chest like 2 stones dropped at once. He was the same height, the same broad-shouldered build, the same dark hair worn short. But where the first brother carried his stillness like armor, this one wore his energy on the surface, It moved in him visibly, a barely banked fire that expressed itself in the set of his jaw and the way his hands opened and closed once at his sides when he saw her. His eyes were the same pale gray as his brother's, but warmer, or rather, he's less cold. Where the first brother's gaze had been a still lake, this one's was the same water running fast over rocks. He came down the steps with a speed that was not quite urgency but close to it. "You found something," he said to his brother, and the tone was not accusatory. It was simply the tone of a man picking up a conversation that had been interrupted somewhere else entirely. She found the river. The first brother moved to stand beside her, not in front, not behind. Beside, Ashveil exile, rogue strain accusation. The second brother's eyes moved to her palm, then back to her face. He had his brother's quality of reading, rather than simply looking. But where the first brother read in silence and gave nothing back, this one could not quite contain his conclusions. "That's not a rogue strain mark," he said. The first brother said nothing. He had, she suspected, already arrived at the same conclusion. Zara looked at the second twin. "What do you mean?" "The rogue strain exile mark has a secondary cut. Here." He touched his own palm, below the first knuckle of the index finger. "Yours doesn't. What they gave you is a standard contamination exile, something they use for wolves who—" He stopped. "Who are a threat," Zara said quietly. "Not because of what they carry. Because of what they are." The second brother looked at her for a long moment. The banked fire in his expression did something she could not quite name, shifted, settled, became something more serious and more careful. "Come inside," he said. "You need to eat. And then I think we need to understand exactly what it is that your pack was afraid of." Zara stood between the two of them, the still water and the fast water, the held breath and the living flame. And for the first time since the Great Hall, since Elder Kale's flat voice reading her out of existence, she felt something that was not fear, and not grief, and not the cold mechanical endurance she had been running on since last night. It was small. She did not trust it yet. She pressed it down carefully, the way she had learned to press everything down, and she followed them inside. But it was there, warmth. The specific warmth of being, for reasons she could not yet explain, exactly where something had always intended her to be. His name was Caius. She learned this the way she learned most things in the stronghold, by observation rather than introduction. The wolves here did not waste words on ceremony. They spoke when something needed saying and were quiet when it did not. And the whole settlement operated with the particular efficiency of people who had built their lives in a place that punished carelessness. The first brother's name she learned from him directly, which surprised her. He had set a plate in front of her, bread, dried meat, something hot in a clay bowl that smelled of root vegetables and wood smoke, and then sat across the table and watched her eat with the same absolute attention he had given the riverbank. And after a long silence, he said, without preamble, "Rael." She looked up. "My name," he said. "Since you've been turning over what to call me since the river." Zara looked at him for a moment. "Is it that obvious? You catalog things. I've been watching you do it since I found you." He picked up his cup. "You cataloged the gate, the settlement, the wolves who looked at you. You cataloged Caius in about 4 seconds. You're doing it now. Is that a problem?" "No," he drank. "It's unusual." Caius dropped into the seat beside his brother with the energy of a man who had been moving since before dawn and had no intention of stopping. He had brought his own cup and someone else's bread, which he ate without apparent awareness of having taken it. "Rael doesn't compliment people," Caius said to her, as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "In case you didn't read that correctly. Unusual is significant. I'll adjust my expectations accordingly," Zara said. Caius looked at her. Then he laughed, a short, genuine sound surprised out of him, and Rael's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted fractionally, the way a candle flame shifts in a room where a door has opened somewhere distant. She ate. They let her eat, which she was grateful for. The particular grace of two people who understood that food came before conversation when someone had spent a night in the cold. When she set her spoon down, Caius leaned forward with his elbows on the table. "Tell me about the exile," he said. "Everything. Start with who read the order." "Elder Kale." "Kale is Ashveil's record keeper, not their justice officer." His eyes sharpened. "A bloodline accusation should be read by the Alpha. Alpha Renwick was present. He gave the sentence, but he didn't read the accusation. No, Caius and Rael exchanged a look. It was brief and without words and carried the specific density of two people who had been communicating in shorthand since before they had language for it. Twins who had spent a lifetime building a private architecture of meaning in the space between sentences. Who initiated the accusation? Rael asked. Zara had been waiting for this question. She had been turning her answer over since the cold dark of last night, pressing it from every angle, making sure she was reading the shape of it correctly before she offered it to anyone. I don't know who signed the formal record, she said, but Beta Saren was the only wolf in that hall whose expression was satisfied rather than relieved. Another look between the brothers. Longer this time. Saren, Caius said, and the name in his mouth had a different weight than she had given it. Older, heavier, as if it were a word he had read in a document he had not liked. You know him, Zara said. We know of him. Rael set down his cup. He's been attempting to acquire territory on Ashveil's eastern border for 3 years. Territory that borders the rogue lands. Zara went still. He wants land that borders you. He wants a buffer, Caius said, between his ambitions and our attention. And he can't acquire it cleanly while Ashveil's internal structure is stable. He looked at her. A manufactured exile creates instability. A beta who engineers the removal of a long-standing pack member through a false bloodline accusation demonstrates a level of influence over the alpha that is useful information. For whom? For anyone watching Ashveil from outside. His pale eyes held hers. Which we have been for approximately 18 months. Zara absorbed this. She absorbed it the way she absorbed most things. Inward and quiet, turning it carefully, not allowing herself to react to any single piece before she had seen how it connected to the others. You've been watching my pack, she said. We watch all the packs that border our territory, Rael said. It was not an apology. It was simply the truth, offered without decoration. And you watched them exile me. A pause. The quality of the silence changed. We saw the border ceremony, Rael said. We didn't know who you were. And now, neither of them answered immediately. She looked from one to the other, the still lake and the running river, both of them watching her with the same careful attention, and understood that they were not withholding. They were deciding how much to say, and in what order, and whether she was ready for the shape of what they knew. Now, Caius said slowly, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly, even if the answer seems impossible to you. Zara waited. Did anything happen in the rogue lands last night? He said, that you could not explain. She thought of the breathing in the dark. The deliberate present breathing that had not been animal and not been wind and had retreated, she understood now, not because it had finished watching, but because it had finished deciding. Something was watching me, she said. I heard it breathe, it didn't approach. Caius leaned back in his chair. He pressed his fingers together in front of his mouth and looked at his brother over them, and Rael looked back. And the private architecture between them was building something she could not yet see the full shape of. It didn't approach, Caius said, because it recognized you. I've never been in the rogue lands before last night. No, Rael stood. He moved to the window, small, set deep in thick stone, looking out onto the settlement below, and stood with his back to the room for a moment. When he turned, his expression had not changed, but his posture had. Something had settled in him, she thought, some decision being made visible in the set of his shoulders. But your blood has. They took her to the records room. It was not a large room. A single table, shelves of bound documents and rolled parchment, a fire that had been burning long enough to have removed all cold from the stone walls. Rael moved to a specific shelf without searching and withdrew a roll of parchment so old its edges had begun to amber. He spread it on the table and weighted the corners with stones that lived there, she suspected, for exactly this purpose. She looked down at a genealogical record. Ancient, the script was a form of pack notation she recognized from her years in the Ashveil medicine stores, but older, the symbols slightly different in their proportions. Names in vertical columns, connected by the thin lines of bloodline inheritance. Her eyes moved across it without direction at first. Then Caius reached past her and set his finger on a name near the center of the document, Sorel of the first line. Luna to the Roguelands. Bonded in blood and moonlight to the twin-born alphas of the borderless territory. Zara read it twice. My grandmother's name was Sorel, she said. Her voice was very level. She was aware of it being very level, and she was using all of the discipline she had to keep it that way.
Your grandmother's mother's mother,
Kaya said. 4 generations back. Sorel is the reason the exile mark was wrong, Rael said from her other side, and she was aware suddenly of both of them standing close, not surrounding her, not pressuring, but present on either side of her the way the oaks had been present in last night's clearing. Rooted. She was never rogue strain. No one in her line was. What she carried, what you carry, is not a contamination. Zara looked at the parchment, at the name, at the thin ink lines that connected it backward and forward through time, and arrived eventually at her. Then what is it? She asked. It was Kazias who answered. He said it quietly, without theater, the way you say a true thing that requires no embellishment. The original Luna bloodline of the Rogue Lands, he said. The only bloodline capable of holding a bond with twin-born alphas simultaneously without fracture. It was believed extinct. The last woman who carried it was driven out of Ashveil territory 4 generations ago, when the pack that would become Ashveil decided they wanted the land she was bonded to and needed the bond broken. The fire crackled. Outside, the settlement moved and breathed in its ordinary morning rhythms, entirely unaware of what was being said in this small stone room. They've been doing it for 4 generations, Zara said. Not a question. Driving out any woman who showed the signs before the bloodline could activate, Rael said, calling it contamination. Building a mythology around it that made the pack do the work for them. His voice was even, clinical almost, but she heard beneath it something that was not clinical at all. Something old and cold and furious held on a very tight leash. It became self-perpetuating. They stopped needing to manufacture the fear. The pack believed it genuinely. Zara placed both hands flat on the table, the cut on her palm pressed against the wood. She thought about Elder Kael's voice. Flat, practiced, without cruelty because he had simply stopped seeing her as a person worth directing cruelty at. She thought about the faces in the hall, the relief, the carefully prearranged certainty. She thought about her mother, who had died when Zara was 11, quiet and withdrawn and worn through in a way that Zara had spent her childhood trying to understand. Her mother had carried this too, had felt the pack's unease settle around her like a net she could never see clearly enough to escape. They knew what they were doing, Zara said, generation after generation. They knew. The elders knew, Kaya said, not all of them, but enough. He paused. Saren knows. That's why he moved now. You were approaching the age at which the bloodline fully activates. Another few months, and even Ashveil's elders wouldn't have been able to hide what you are. And what am I? She said, and she heard the question come out of her stripped of everything except its bare necessity. Not rhetorical, not grief. Simply the need to know finally, after 23 years of being told she was less, to hear someone say plainly what she actually was. Rael moved to stand in front of her. He was close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. The ice water gray. Utterly still, but with something beneath the stillness that she'd been cataloging all morning and only now had enough pieces to name. Recognition. Old and certain and not entirely comfortable, the way recognizing something you have been looking for without knowing it is not always comfortable. Because it means the looking is over, and the looking is sometimes the thing that has been keeping you standing. You are the Luna this territory was built for, he said. The one the moon goddess put the rogue lands aside for 4 generations before you were born. The reason the land didn't reject you last night. The reason the wolves in this settlement looked at you and couldn't explain what they were feeling. He held her gaze. The reason neither Caius nor I can stand at a normal distance from you without something in our wolves refusing the instruction. The fire, the room, the ancient parchment with her great-great-grandmother's name on it. Zara looked at Rael, then at Caius, who was watching her with the banked fire, turned low and serious and entirely focused. She thought about 23 years of learning to want nothing, because wanting things was how you gave the pack something to take from you. She thought about the coin. She sees you. She has not forgotten you. Falling from her fingers at the border. She looked back at the parchment. At the thin ink line that ran from Sorel's name, forward through time, through her grandmother, through her mother to her. Not a contamination, not a curse. Not a wound that had been passed down like damaged cargo through women who had done nothing to deserve it. A promise, delayed 4 generations, still intact. Zara straightened. She lifted her hands from the table. She looked at the cut on her palm, the mark Ashveil had put on her to sever what they thought was an ordinary bond, and she understood now what she had felt guttering out at the border. Not her pack bond, something older, something that had been sleeping and had felt the cold and had stirred. "What happens next?" she said. And for the first time since the river, since the gate, since the records room, for the first time since she had walked into the Roguelands carrying nothing but a blanket and a knife and the last remnants of a faith she had nearly finished losing. Caius smiled. It was brief. It transformed his face entirely and was gone again quickly, as it wasn't sure yet he had the right to it. "Next," he said, "we deal with Saron." Outside, the morning moved into afternoon. The settlement breathed. The Roguelands held their ancient, patient silence around the stronghold walls. And somewhere deep in the dark between the old trees, in the soil that remembered a woman named Sorel and the promise made over her blood 4 generations ago, something that had been waiting a very long time felt the waiting begin, finally, to end. Word travels in wolf settlements the way water travels through stone, not quickly, but with a certainty that has nothing to do with speed. By the time the afternoon light had shifted from gray to amber, and the cook fires were being built up against the coming cold, the stronghold knew. Not the details. Rael and Caius had not announced anything, had not gathered the settlement or made declarations. They had simply moved through the day with Zara present, and the wolves of the Roguelands were people who had survived by reading exactly this kind of signal. She felt it in the way the settlement's eyes moved when she crossed the yard. Not the quick assessment of the morning. The calculating, threat-measuring look of a community that had learned wariness as a first language. This was different, slower. The way you look at something you are trying to place in a category your existing categories cannot accommodate. A woman named Davon found her at the water cistern in the late afternoon. Davon was perhaps 50, with the kind of face that had been weathered into something more interesting than beauty. Strong-boned, careful-eyed, her gray-streaked hair pulled back with the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who had not thought about their appearance in years because they had more important things to think about. She was, Zara would later learn, the settlement's head healer. She had been in the Roguelands for 20 years, exiled from a northern pack for reasons she did not discuss and no one asked about, because that was the custom here. She handed Zara a clean strip of linen for her palm without being asked. "Let me look at it," she said. Zara opened her hand. Davon examined the cut with the brisk attention of someone who had seen 10,000 wounds and was interested only in what this one required. "Clean," she said. "Healing well." She paused, her thumb hovering just above the cut without touching. Faster than it should be for a wound this fresh. "Is that unusual?" Davon looked up at her. The careful eyes moved across her face with a thoroughness that reminded her unexpectedly of Rael at the riverbank. "In most wolves," Davon said, "yes." She released Zara's hand and began winding the linen strip around it with neat, practiced turns. In a Luna-blooded wolf approaching full activation, she paused again, chose her next word with visible deliberateness. "Less so." Zara looked at her. "You know what I am. I knew what you were when you walked through the gate this morning." Davon tied off the bandage with a small, firm knot. "I've been in this settlement long enough to know what the brothers look like when they're in the presence of an ordinary exile, and what they look like when something else is happening." She straightened. "They've been waiting for you. They didn't know they were waiting. But the Roguelands know, and the land communicates if you learn how to listen." "How long have you been listening?" "Long enough." Davon picked up her basket. "Come to the healing house tonight. After the evening meal, I have things that belonged to the last woman the land recognized." She paused at the edge of the cistern path and looked back. Her name was Mira. She came here 60 years ago, before the brothers, before the current settlement. She didn't survive long enough for the bond to complete, but she left things behind. Her expression was not quite sorrow and not quite hope, something that lived carefully between the two. She seemed to know that someone would eventually come to use them. She walked away before Zara could respond, moving through the settlement with the purposeful economy of a woman who had not wasted a step in 2 decades. Zara stood at the cistern with linen on her palm and the late afternoon light falling cold through the canopy above the walls, and she thought about a woman named Mira who had come here 60 years ago and left things behind for someone she would never meet. She thought about Sorel 4 generations back, with her name in ink on ancient parchment. She thought about her mother, worn through and quiet, all of them carrying the same blood, all of them caught before it could arrive where it was going. "Not this time," said something in her chest. Not her voice, not a voice she recognized, older than either. Not this time. The evening meal was taken communally in the main hall. Zara had not expected this either, the ordinariness of it. Long tables, fires at both ends of the hall. The settlement crowded in with a specific, comfortable noise of people who ate together every night and had stopped noticing that they did. Children at the lower tables, older wolves at the upper. Arguments about entirely mundane things. Who had left the northern gate latch improperly secured? Whether the winter stores were adequately prepared, a long-running disagreement between 2 men about the correct way to cure hide. She sat between Caius and Rael, which was, she understood, a statement, not theatrical. They had simply sat on either side of her without discussion, the way you sit in the place you belong, and the hall had seen it and filed it away in the particular quiet manner of a community that had learned the difference between information that required a response and information that simply needed to be known. Caius talked through most of the meal. This, she was already understanding, was his natural condition. Not empty talk, never that, but a continuous engagement with the world around him that expressed itself in words. He spoke about the settlement, pointed out wolves whose histories he thought she should know, explained the layout of the rogue land's territory with the ease of a man, describing the rooms of his own house. Rael ate and listened and contributed, at intervals, with a single sentence that invariably reoriented everything Caius had just said. She started watching for it. The moment Caius finished a thought, and Rael would wait 1 beat, and then add the one piece that changed its shape. They had been doing it so long, they no longer noticed they were doing it. A private architecture, externally invisible, that held up everything they built together. She was watching for it when Caius stopped mid-sentence. The hall had not gone silent. It was as a single wolf at the door, a young male, barely 20, with the look of someone who had been running. He caught Caius's eye, and the subtle tightening around Caius's jaw told her everything before he spoke. "News from the border," Rael said quietly. "Not a question." "East border," the young wolf said, reaching their end of the table. He was keeping his voice low, but Zara heard the edge in it, the specific thinness of controlled alarm. 3 Ashveil scouts. They came over the boundary line by about 40 feet, then pulled back, but they were marking the trees. "Marking how?" Caius said. "Fresh cuts. The claim pattern." The hall continued its noise around them. The argument about curing hide was still going at the next table. 2 children were conducting a spirited disagreement over a piece of bread. Ordinary evening, ordinary settlement. And at this end of the table, something cold had arrived and was being received without panic, because these were people who had learned a long time ago that panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Saren moves fast," Caius said, to no one in particular. His voice was entirely level. It was the levelness of a man setting something on a shelf carefully so that he could deal with it properly later. "He didn't expect her to survive the first night," Rael said. "No." Caius looked at Zara. He expected the rogue lands to do his work for him. She absorbed this, and now that they didn't. "Now he needs to know where she is and what's happening," Rael said. The scouts weren't there to challenge. They were there to look. "Let them look," Zara said. Both brothers turned to her. The hall moved and breathed around them. "They'll see us a woman who survived," she continued. "They'll report back to Saran that the exile is alive and has been taken in by the rogue land settlement. And Saran will have to decide what to do with that information before he understands what it means." She met Caius's eyes, then Rael's. "That gives us time." Rael looked at her for a long moment. The ice water gray, reading her the way he had read the riverbank. "Time for what?" Caius said, and there was something in the question, not challenge, not skepticism, interest. The specific interest of a man who suspected he already liked the answer. "Time to make sure," Zara said carefully, "that when Saran does understand what it means, it's already too late for the understanding to be useful to him." The silence between the three of them lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then Caius picked up his cup and turned back to his meal with the air of someone making a decision visible through posture alone. "She understands strategy," he said to Rael as if she were not sitting between them. "I told you," Rael said. "You told me she cataloged things. That's observation. This is strategy. It's different. They come from the same place. In exceptional cases." Zara looked from one to the other. "I can hear you." "We know," Caius said, and there was the smile again. Brief, genuine, slightly helpless. "We're choosing to let you hear us. It's a form of respect." He glanced at her sideways. "Rael doesn't do it. I have to compensate." From her other side, she heard something that was almost certainly not the sound Rael would call a laugh, but was adjacent to one. Davin's healing house was warm and smelled of dried herbs, a smell that hit Zara with a force she had not braced for because it was the smell of the Ashveil medicine stores where she had spent the quietest years of her life, and she had not understood until this moment how much she had loved that work. Not the pack, the work, the careful ordering of things, the knowledge that plants carried, the specific satisfaction of matching a remedy to a need. Davin was waiting at the central table. On the table was a wooden box, old and dark with handling, its corners reinforced with iron that had gone soft with age. She opened it without ceremony. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were 3 things. A small journal, its leather cracked but intact. A glass vial of something dark and resinous, stopped with wax. And a length of woven cord, silver white, the color of moonlight on water, with a knot at each end that Zara recognized after a moment as a bonding cord, the kind used in Luna ceremonies. "Mira's," Davin said. Zara looked at the bonding cord. The silver-white weave was a kind she had never seen used, not the standard pack cord for ordinary bond ceremonies, which was always a single color. This was 2 threads twisted together, to become one. She thought about what Rael had read her from the ancient parchment, bonded in blood and moonlight to the twin-born alphas. "A dual bond cord," she said. "The last one ever made in this territory," Davin said. Mira made it herself. She had enough time for that before. She stopped, began again. She knew the theory. She understood what she was. She just didn't have the protection she needed to complete it. Zara picked up the journal. The pages were brittle at the edges, but legible. A small, precise handwriting, the kind that spoke of someone who had trained themselves to take up as little space as possible on the page. She read the first entry. "I have been here 3 weeks. The land knows me. I know the land. The brothers who were here before these brothers, the ones who held this territory 2 generations back, I can feel their echo in the soil. The way you feel the shape of a hand in old leather. This place was made for what I am. I was made for this place. I understand this completely, and I am afraid anyway, because understanding a thing and surviving it are not the same." Zara closed the journal. She held it for a moment. She was afraid, Davin said quietly, but she documented everything, every stage of the activation, every symptom, every change. Everything she learned about the bloodline and the bond and the land. She paused. She left it because she was afraid someone else would arrive without knowing what she had known, and have to learn it all over again from nothing, in the cold. Zara set the journal down on the table. Then she picked it up again and held it against her chest, because she could not explain what it meant to her. The idea of a woman she had never met, 60 years ago, choosing to leave a lamp on for a stranger she would never see. "Thank you," she said. Devon waved this away with the efficiency of a woman who had no use for gratitude and all the use in the world for competence. "Read it tonight. There are passages," she marked, "folded corners. Start with those." She began covering the box again. "And Zara, yes, the activation accelerates in proximity to the twin bond." She said it without looking up, with the careful neutrality of a healer delivering a prognosis. "It will become noticeable to you and to them. Symptoms vary, but Mira documents them thoroughly." A pause. "Be straightforward with the brothers about what you're experiencing. They will feel it too. The 3 of you trying to manage it privately, separately, in order to avoid the awkwardness will go considerably worse than simply." "Being direct," Zara said. "Being direct," Davin agreed, and this time there was something that might have been a smile at the corner of her mouth. Small, dry, the smile of a woman who had watched many situations go considerably worse than they needed to. She was back in the room they had given her, small, stone-walled, with a fire that had been lit by someone before she arrived, when the knock came. not Caius's knock. She already knew the difference. Caius knocked the way he did everything, with energy, present and immediate, announcing itself. This was a single quiet rap. Rael. "Come in," she said. He opened the door and stood in the frame without entering, which she was understanding was his way. He did not occupy space he had not been given. He looked at the journal in her lap, and the fire, and the expression on her face, which she had not yet assembled into anything neutral, and he said nothing for a moment. "Davin told you about the acceleration," he said. "Yes, I want you to know." He stopped. Began again with the precision of a man choosing between several true things and taking the one that was most necessary. What you carry doesn't obligate you to anything. The bloodline is real. The land's recognition is real. What it means for you, what you choose to do with it, that belongs to you. Zara looked at him. You've been thinking about how to say that since the records room. The fractional pause. Yes. Because you were worried I would feel trapped. You've spent 23 years being told what you are by people who were wrong about it. The last thing you need is to arrive somewhere that simply replaces one set of instructions with another. The fire moved between them, warm and ordinary. Zara thought about Mira's first journal entry. Understanding a thing and surviving it are not the same. I don't feel trapped, she said. I feel informed. For the first time. She held the journal up slightly. She documented the fear too. That helps. Something in Rael's posture changed, the subtle, seismic shift she was learning to read as his version of what Caius did openly with his whole face. Rest, he said. Tomorrow will require you. What happens tomorrow? The East Border Scouts will have reported back to Saren by dawn. He'll make a move within 48 hours. His eyes met hers. And you said we need to make sure he understands too late. So tomorrow we build the thing that makes it too late. He stepped back from the door, then paused. Zara, yes, the land chose well, he said, simply, without theater, and pulled the door closed before she could respond. She sat for a long time after that, with the fire and the journal and the bonding cord in its box on the table beside her, and outside the stronghold walls the rogue lands breathed in their ancient patient dark. And for the first time in her life, the dark did not feel like something to endure. It felt like something waiting for her to be ready. She opened the journal to the first folded corner and began to read. The marked corners in Mira's journal were not evenly distributed. The first cluster came early. The first 2 weeks, densely annotated, the handwriting slightly less controlled than the rest, as if the urgency of getting it down had overridden the careful smallness she normally kept to. These pages were about the physical symptoms of activation, the warmth in the sternum that came and went without warning, the heightened sensory acuity, sound carrying further, scent becoming layered and informational in a way that ordinary pack wolves described but Luna-blooded wolves apparently experienced at a different magnitude entirely. The way proximity to the twin bond shortened the distance between feeling something and knowing it. Zara read until the fire burned low, then built it up and read further. The second cluster of marked pages was about fear, not the fear of the rogue lands or the fear of the activation. Mira had written about those plainly and moved through them. This fear was more specific. It was the fear of being worth something. The fear of having so long as the thing a pack discarded, that the offer of a different identity felt less like rescue and more like a new kind of trap. A trap lined with warmth, which was the most dangerous kind, because you wanted to walk into it. I keep waiting, Mira had written, for the condition, for the price. For the morning when one of them says, yes, but accepting that there is no condition is taking longer than surviving the exile did. I don't know what that says about me. I suspect it says something true. Zara read that passage 3 times. Then she folded her own corner into the page and set the journal on the table and lay down on the narrow bed with her eyes open, looking at the ceiling, and she thought about all the small ways she had been bracing for the condition since the river. All the ways she had been holding the warmth of this place at a slight distance, inventorying it rather than receiving it, because inventorying it felt safer than believing it. She slept eventually, dreamlessly, the deepest sleep she could remember. She woke to the smell of smoke that was not the fire. It was not yet dawn. The quality of the dark said an hour before first light. That specific dead hour when the night was heaviest. She She was at the window before she was fully awake, her body having made the decision before her mind caught up, and she looked down into the settlement yard. Rael was already there. He was standing in the center of the yard with 3 other wolves, all of them looking toward the eastern wall. The eastern wall, where 2 of the settlement's night watch were positioned at the top of the timber parapet looking out. Zara was dressed and out the door in under 2 minutes. The cold hit her like a flat hand. She crossed the yard quickly, and Rael turned before she reached him. Hearing her, she suspected the moment she opened the building door. "What is it?" she said. "Not a question. Fire," he said. "Small, deliberate, set in the tree line about 300 yards east of the wall. A signal, or a provocation." He turned back to the wall. "Caius has gone to the east gate. How many? We don't know yet." He glances at her sideways. "You should be inside." "I'm outside," she said, the fractional pause. He did not argue. They moved to the east wall together. Caius was at the gate with 6 wolves when they arrived. A mix of the settlement's most experienced fighters. People who wore the roguelands the way others wore pack colors, entirely unself-consciously. They acknowledged Rael with the efficiency of people accustomed to taking their cues from him. Their eyes went to Zara once, recalibrated, and stayed forward. 4 of them, Caius said to Rael without preamble. His energy was different from last night's. The banked fire turned fully operational now, focused and cold, in a way that retained none of the warmth she had become accustomed to. She understood that she was seeing for the first time who Caius was when the settlement required it. Ashveil tracking formation, 2 by 2, spread pattern. They're not hiding. They want to be seen. "Saren's message," Rael said. "He's telling us he knows she's here." Caius looked at his brother. "And that he's not afraid of us knowing that he knows. That's a mistake." Yes, something flickered in Caius's expression. Not amusement, not quite, but adjacent to the territory where amusement lived. "It is." Zara looked out through the gate's narrow viewport at the tree line. She could not see the 4 scouts from here. The darkness and the distance prevented it. But she could smell the smoke of the small, deliberate fire, sharp and resinous, pine sap burning. Intentional. The kind of fire that went out quickly and was meant to. "They'll have instructions," she said. Both brothers looked at her. "Saren doesn't send scouts to start a conflict he's not positioned to finish," she said. "He's ambitious, not reckless. The fire to announce presence, not to threaten. He wants a response." She turned it over. "He wants to know if I'm here voluntarily." Why does that matter to him?" Caius said. And she heard in the question that he already had a theory and was testing hers against it. "Because if I'm here under compulsion, he has grounds to appeal to the neighboring packs. A pack exile being held against her will in rogue territory. A cause that's easy to rally around, easy to use as justification for a border challenge." She looked at the gate. "But if I'm here voluntarily, if I've chosen the roguelands, that narrative collapses. He needs to know which situation he's managing before he builds his next move." The silence lasted perhaps 4 seconds. "Send them back with an answer," Rael said. Caius turned to look at him. "What answer?" "The true one," Rael said, and his eyes moved briefly to Zara, not asking permission, simply, she searched for the word, acknowledging. "She's here because she chose to be. And because the land chose her," Caius said quietly. He was looking at Zara now, and the operational coldness had not left his face entirely, but it had shifted, the way weather shifts. Same sky, different light. "Which Saren will hear as a declaration." "It is a declaration," Rael said. Another silence. Around them, the settlement wolves stood steady and quiet, watching the brothers arrive at the decision, the way wolves watch the sky arrive at weather. Not passive, but understanding that some things are larger than intervention. Zara looked at Rael, then at Caius, the still lake and the running river. Both of them watching her with the same expression beneath their different surfaces. The expression she had been cataloging since the river, since the records room, since the evening meal where Rael had made the noise adjacent to a laugh. Waiting, she thought. They're waiting for me, not for her permission, for her certainty. For the moment when she stopped holding the warmth at a careful inventory distance and received it. She thought about Mira's marked page. Accepting that there is no condition is taking longer than surviving the exile did. She thought about Devon, not smiling, saying, "Be direct." She thought about 23 years of making herself small so the pack would not notice what she was, and the exile mark on her palm, and the door the exile had turned out to be. "Open the gate," she said. Caius looked at her. "Zara, open it. Let them see me. Standing here between you on this side of the wall." She held his gaze. That is Saron's answer. He doesn't need words for it. He needs the image, because he'll understand immediately what it means, and so will every wolf he sends it back to. The quiet stretched. Then Caius turned to the nearest wolf and gave a single nod. The gate opened. The 4 Ashveil scouts were at the tree line, exactly where Caius had placed them, spread pattern 2 by 2, close enough to observe, and far enough to run if they needed to. They were good. Professional. They held their formation without shifting when the gate opened, which took discipline. Their discipline lasted until they saw her. She watched it move through them. The recognition, and then the second recognition underneath it, the one that was about more than simply identifying her face. She was standing between the twin alpha brothers of the rogue lands, inside their gate on their ground, and she was standing there the way you stand somewhere that belongs to you. Upright. Unhurried. Her exile-marked palm visible at her side. The left. Senior, she judged, from the way the others oriented to him slightly, held position for a long moment. She could see him reading the scene the way Saron had trained him to read scenes. Compiling it, preparing the report. Then he lifted his right hand, fist closed, the Ashveil gesture for acknowledged, and the 4 of them withdrew into the trees. Within seconds, they were gone. Only the smell of the dying fire remained. Caius let out a breath that was not quite a sigh and was not quite a laugh. "Well," he said, "that simplifies several things and complicates several others." "Saron will move within a day," Rael said. He was watching the tree line. He'll know the scouts saw something significant. He'll want the full report before he commits to a response, but he won't wait long after that. "We need the settlement prepared," Caius said. He turned from the gate, already in motion, the operational focus pulling him forward. He paused at Zara's shoulder. "You should know what you just did. Standing at the gate." He said it quietly, for her alone. Half the settlement watched from the walls. By breakfast, they'll all know. He held her gaze for a moment. "You've been here less than a day, and you're already making this place yours. I want you to know that I see that we see it." He moved away before she could respond, calling to the settlement wolves with the quick economy of a man who had a great deal to organize and was already doing 3 things simultaneously. Zara stood at the open gate with Rael beside her, and the rogue lands spreading dark and ancient beyond the wall. "He means it," Rael said, "not to fill the silence. He never spoke to fill silences. To complete something." "I know," she said. They stood together for a moment in the cold, watching the tree line settle back into its ordinary dark. The fire had burned out completely now. The only smell was pine and frost, and the particular wild earth scent of territory that answered to no pack. "The activation," she said carefully. "Myra's journal describes it accelerating. I've been feeling it." She paused. "Since the gate opened, since the 3 of us stood together." Rael was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "You feel it too. Caius and I have both felt it since the river." He turned to look at her, and in the dark his pale eyes were very clear. "We didn't say anything because we didn't want to. Put a condition on the warmth," she said. The fractional pause. "Yes." She looked at him. He looked at her. The cold air moved between them with the ordinary indifference of a world that did not care at all about the magnitude of small moments. "Devon said to be direct," Zara said. "Devon says that to everyone. She says it because it works." The corner of his mouth moved. "Not quite the smile, something smaller and more private." "Yes," he said. "She says it because it works." They walked back from the gate together as the settlement began to stir around them, the first gray light of dawn feeling its careful way through the canopy. By mid-morning, the stronghold was a different kind of busy. Rael had taken the Eastern Watch rotation, personally, redistributing the settlement's most experienced wolves to the 3 border-facing walls and leaving the internal organization to the senior pack members, who had been doing it long enough to manage without instruction. Caius had spent 2 hours in the records room and emerged with maps spread under his arm and the expression of a man who had found what he was looking for and did not entirely like it. He found Zara in the healing house with Devon, where she had spent the morning, learning the settlement's medicine inventory with a thoroughness that had apparently surprised Davon, and then stopped surprising her. "Saren's not coming alone," Caius said, spreading the largest map on the table between the herb bundles and the clay pots. "Look!" Zara leaned over the map. It was a territorial overview, the rogue lands at the center, the surrounding pack territories marked in different inks. Ashveil to the east, 3 other packs along the northern and southern borders. Caius pointed to 2 marks she hadn't noticed initially, small notations in the margin of the Ashveil section, in a different hand than the rest of the map. "These are from our Border Watchers' reports from the last 6 months," he said. "Movement patterns. Ashveil has been receiving visitors here, and here." He tapped 3 points along Ashveil's inner territory. "Border alphas from the Crestfall and Dunmore packs. 6 visits in 5 months. Saren's been building alliances," Zara said. "Saren's been building a coalition," Cass corrected. "There's a difference. Alliances are for trade and mutual defense. Coalitions are for a specific objective." He looked at her, the objective being the legitimization of an aggressive border claim, which requires a justification that the other packs will accept publicly. "A Luna-blooded exile in rogue hands," Zara said slowly. "More specifically, a Luna-blooded exile who represents a historical claim to rogue territory, being held by the very wolves who benefit from that claim." Caius straightened. "He's been constructing this narrative for months, maybe longer. He needed you in the rogue lands, visible for the narrative to have a face." The full shape of it arrived in Zara's mind, with the cold clarity of a thing seen properly for the first time. "He engineered the exile to create the justification," she said. "He created the exile to create a martyr," Caius said. "A Luna bloodline, cast out by a corrupt pack elder, taken in by the savage wolves who want to use her ancient claim to legitimize their territory. A story every pack in this region will understand and respond to." He paused. "Except that the story requires you to be unwilling, frightened, held against your wishes. And instead I'm standing at the gate between you," Zara said. "And instead you're standing at the gate between us." Something moved through his expression, not satisfaction, not yet, but its precursor. The look of a problem being dismantled from the inside, which means his narrative has a problem. And a man who has spent months building a coalition around a specific story, who discovers has a problem 24 hours before he intends to use it. "We'll improvise," Zara said. "And improvised plans have exposed edges." Caius looked at her with the expression she was beginning to understand was his version of Rael's fractional pause, the brief, visible moment of recalibration. "You've been thinking about this since last night," he said. "Since the scouts," she said. "When I understood what Saren needed from the image." She looked at the map. "He'll come personally. He has to. A coalition built on a narrative needs its architect present to manage the performance. He'll bring enough wolves to make a show of force without constituting an outright attack, because an outright attack on rogue territory invites retaliation, and the Crestfall and Dunmore packs aren't ready to commit to that." She traced the eastern border with her fingertip, not touching the map. "He'll demand a formal assembly. Pack law requires the rogue lands to participate in a border arbitration if 3 or more packs request it." "We know the law," Rael said from the doorway. She had not heard him arrive. Neither, she thought, had Caius. He glanced at his brother with the slight adjustment of someone recalculating how long a person had been present. Rael moved to the table. He looked at the map and then at Zara. "You're describing the arbitration as the battlefield," he said. "It is the battlefield," she said. "Saren knows he can't take this territory by force, not without more commitment than he has. But a formal arbitration, with a coalition majority and a compelling narrative, can result in a binding territorial judgment that even the rogue lands are obligated to respect under interpack law." She paused. "Unless the narrative collapses before the judgment is rendered. And we collapse the narrative," Caius said, "by making the true story visible before he can establish his version. With evidence," Zara said. "The parchment from the records room. Mira's journal, the Bloodline documentation." She looked at both of them, and me. "Standing up in a formal assembly and making the account in my own voice before Saran can frame it for me." The silence in the healing house was the productive kind, not empty, but full of people thinking at speed. "There's a risk," Rael said. "Several," Zara agreed. The primary one being that a formal assembly puts you in a room with Saren and whatever wolves he brings, and did not hesitate to exile you once. His voice was even, his eyes were not. He will not hesitate to make a more permanent move if he believes you are a direct threat to his position. Zara looked at him. I know. I want to make sure you know, Rael. She held his gaze. I spent 23 years being careful enough not to be a threat. I was exiled anyway. She paused. I'm done with careful in the way that doesn't work. I'm done with the kind of careful that keeps you safe and small and invisible, and still doesn't save you. She looked from him to Caius and back. The only careful worth having now is the kind that wins. The fire in the hearth moved. Davin, who had been silent at the end of the table throughout all of this, made a small sound that was absolutely not a laugh and was entirely a laugh. Rael looked at Zara for a long moment, the ice water gray, reading her with that absolute attention. Then something behind his eyes settled. The deep current shift she had learned to recognize as his version of a decision made. Then we prepare, he said. We prepare, Caius agreed, and the operational focus was fully back, bright and hard and directed. He began rolling the map. We have perhaps 20 hours before Saren requests the arbitration. I want the parchment authenticated, the journal copied for evidence, and I want every wolf in this settlement who holds a historical memory of the Luna bloodline in front of me before nightfall. He moved toward the door, already in motion. Then he stopped and turned back, and the focus shifted for just a moment into something more personal, directed at Zara with a precision that was entirely Caius, warm and direct, and without the armor that other people used to make sincerity deniable. Mira didn't get to finish it, he said. 60 years ago, she came here and she understood everything, and she documented it for someone she'd never meet, and she didn't get to finish it. He held her gaze. You do. And we're not going to let what happened to her happen to you. He left before she could answer. Zara stood in the warm, herb-scented air of the healing house with Rael beside her, and Davon quietly rearranging things at the far end of the table with the deliberate tact of a woman giving people room. And she felt the warmth, the real warmth, the kind she had been holding at careful inventory distance, arrive in her chest without condition, without price, without the fine print she had been waiting for. She did not press it down, she let it stay. Saran arrived at noon. He came with 14 wolves. Zara counted them from the eastern wall where she stood with Rael, watching the tree line open and deliver them in a loose formation that was designed to look unthreatening and was not. 14 was the precise number. She understood immediately that communicated serious intent without constituting an act of aggression under interpack law. 13 wolves was a formal delegation. 15 was a war party. 14 was the specific number of a man who had studied the boundary between those definitions and positioned himself exactly on the safe side of it. Behind Saran's delegation, visible at the tree line but not crossing into the approach corridor, were more wolves. She counted 11. The Crestfall and Dunmore representatives, here to witness, not to act. Coalition wolves who had been told a story and come to watch it confirmed. Caius appeared at her shoulder. He looked at the delegation and then at the tree-line witnesses and did the same arithmetic she had done, arriving at the same conclusion in perhaps 2 seconds. 14, he said. He studied the law carefully, Zara said. He studies everything carefully. Caius's voice was level. That's what makes him dangerous, and that's what's going to make the fall worse when it comes. Careful men hate surprises. She looked at Saren. She had not seen him since the Great Hall, since his face in the crowd carrying its small, private satisfaction. Distance and 2 days had not changed him. Medium height, economically built, with the kind of face that people consistently underestimated because it arranged itself so naturally into reasonableness. He was wearing his beta markings visibly, the rank cord at his wrist that identified his standing in the Ashveil hierarchy. He was not, she noticed, wearing the alpha cord. Renwick isn't with him, she said. Renwick was never going to be with him, Rael said from her other side. Renwick signed the exile order because Saran gave him no good alternative. He didn't come today because Saren gave him an equally persuasive reason to stay home. He paused. A coalition legitimacy claim doesn't need the originating alpha present. It needs witnesses and a majority. And a story, Zara said. And a story, Rael agreed, which he's about to try to tell. Below, Saran stopped 20 feet from the gate and looked up at the wall. He looked directly at her, not at the brothers, not at the assembled settlement wolves, at her. And his expression when he found her standing between the twin alphas of the rogue lands, with her shoulders back and her exile mark visible, did exactly what she had predicted it would do. It recalibrated. She watched him absorb the image, process it, file it away, and begin to build a new approach around it in the time it took most people to blink. He was good. She gave him that. He was very good. The satisfaction was entirely gone. He had filed that away, too, understanding that its visibility would cost him. What replaced it was the practiced reasonableness that was his most effective tool. "I'm here to request formal arbitration," he called up, "under inter-pack law, on the grounds of unlawful detention of an exiled pack member and historical territorial misrepresentation by the wolves of the rogue lands." He paused. Perfectly timed. "I bring witnesses from the Crestfall and Dunmore packs, as required by the arbitration charter." The yard behind Zara was full. Every wolf in the settlement who could be present was present. Caius had quietly ensured it through the morning, not with orders, but with the specific kind of word spreading that a community this size accomplished without machinery when its alpha wanted something known. They were standing behind her and beside her and on the walls round her, and the weight of their presence was not threatening. It was simply real. A whole settlement of people who had built their lives in the place the civilized packs refused to name, who had chosen the rogue lands deliberately and made it hold, standing behind the woman the land had been waiting for. Zara stepped forward to the wall's edge. "The rogue lands acknowledge the request," she said. Her voice carried, the cold air and the silence of the assembled wolves behind her, carrying it further than she expected. "Arbitration will be held in the assembly ground. All parties and witnesses are invited to enter." Saran looked at her for a moment, a man recalibrating again more quickly this time. She watched him decide that this was acceptable, that a woman willing to face arbitration was either very confident or very foolish, and that both outcomes were manageable. He had not yet understood that a third option existed. The assembly ground was a wide, flat space inside the stronghold walls, deliberately maintained, Caius had told her, because the rogue land's founding documents required a formal space for interpack proceedings. Another detail that Saran had apparently not known. The discovery of it. The discovery that this settlement had founding documents at all moved across his face in a flicker of surprise he could not entirely suppress when he entered and saw the space. Caius noted it, said nothing, filed it. The arbitration format was straightforward under interpack law. Each party presented their account. Evidence was offered and examined. The coalition witnesses rendered a judgment. The judgment was binding. Saran had designed this, Zara knew, to end in approximately 20 minutes with a judgment that removed her from the rogue lands under coalition authority, placed her under Ashveil custody pending a review of the exile ruling, a review that Saran controlled and established a precedent for a territorial challenge that he could use over the following months to peel away the rogue lands border claims piece by piece. It was a good plan. It was a careful plan. It had been months in the making, and it had the internal logic of a structure built by a man who had studied every angle. It had one flaw. He had not been inside the records room. He made his account first, which was his right as the requesting party. He spoke for 11 minutes. Zara listened to every word with the same attention she had given everything for 2 days, cataloging, holding, understanding the shape. He was skilled. The account he gave was not a lie. It was something more dangerous than a lie. It was a selective truth, the kind that was technically accurate in every individual piece and completely false in its totality. He spoke about the rogue strain bloodline and the exile ruling and the ancient history of the territory with the measured authority of a man who had done his research. He was careful never to say that she was being held against her will. He simply structured the account in such a way that the coalition witnesses would arrive at that conclusion themselves, which was more persuasive than stating it directly. He concluded with a formal request for the witnesses to confirm the arbitration grounds. The 2 coalition wolves, one from Crestfall, one from Dunmore, both senior betas with the careful eyes of people sent to witness, not to decide, nodded. The grounds were confirmed. Saran permitted himself the smallest possible expression of satisfaction. Then Zara stood up. She had decided, somewhere between midnight and dawn with Mira's journal in her hands, that she would not begin with the evidence. Evidence was for the end. Evidence was the thing you placed in the field after you had cleared it. The structure that made everything that had been said before it permanently and immovably true. Beginning with evidence was what a defensive case looked like. She was not making a defensive case. She began with Sorel. 4 generations ago, she said, her voice level and unhurried in the cold assembly ground air, a woman named Sorel was driven out of what is now Ashveil territory. She was not exiled for contamination. She was not exiled for a bloodline threat. She was exiled because the pack that had moved onto her land needed the land's bond broken, and the land's bond ran through her. She paused. Sorel carried the original Luna bloodline of the Rogue Lands, an ancient bloodline, older than the current pack hierarchy, older than the border laws that govern this arbitration. A bloodline that the Rogue Lands themselves recognize the way territory recognizes the claim that was made over it before any other. She saw it move through the coalition witnesses, the slight forward lean of people encountering something they had not been told to expect. Saron's expression had gone very still. After Sorel, she continued, her daughter carried the bloodline, and her daughter's daughter. And in each generation, when the woman came of age, when the bloodline approached activation, the elders of Ashveil found a reason to exile her, a contamination accusation, a rogue strain notation. A carefully worded record that turned a Luna bloodline into a liability, generation after generation, so that the land's claim could never be completed. She looked directly at the coalition witnesses. I am the 4th generation. My exile is not a legal proceeding. It is the 4th repetition of a deliberate suppression of a bloodline that threatens the illegitimate territorial claim Ashveil has held since Sorel was removed. This is a narrative, Saran said. His voice was controlled. Precisely, carefully controlled, which told her everything. Without documentation, it carries no weight under arbitration law. Then we'll examine the documentation, Zara said. Caius set the records room parchment on the assembly table. It landed with the weight of something that had been waiting a long time to be set down in the right place. The authentication took 20 minutes. The Crestfall Beta, older, with the look of someone who had spent decades in the administrative machinery of interpack law, examined the parchment with the thoroughness of a man who understood what he was looking at, and understood equally what it meant for the case he had come here expecting to witness. Zara watched his face as he read, watched the moment he reached Sorel's name and the notation beneath it. He looked up at Saran. Something passed between them. Not a communication, not exactly. More like the moment when a shared assumption becomes visibly unshareable. The document appears authentic, the Crestfall Beta said carefully. The notation style and parchment composition are consistent with records from the period indicated. The bloodline claim requires corroboration, Saran said. His voice had not changed. His face had not changed. He was holding his performance together with the skill of a man who had spent years learning to hold things together, and she could see very precisely the effort it was costing him now. A single document. There is a second document, Rael said. He set Mira's journal on the table beside the parchment. He opened it to the first marked page, then the second, then the third, laying the documentation of a woman who had sat alone in the Rogue Lands 60 years ago and written down everything she knew for someone she would never meet so that the knowing would survive. The Dunmore Beta leaned forward and read. The assembly ground was entirely silent. Zara looked at Saron while the Betas read. He was looking at the journal with the expression of a man watching a structure he had built carefully over a long time develop a crack that he could not locate the origin of quickly enough to address. The practiced reasonableness was still there. It would always be there. It was too deeply trained to simply leave, but beneath it something else was visible now. She had seen it before on a different face in a different hall. Fear, the specific fear of a man who had been certain and was no longer. She let him hold it. She did not speak. She did not need to speak. The journal was speaking in Mira's small, careful handwriting, and the parchment was speaking, and the land itself was speaking in the way it always had. Patient and ancient, and entirely indifferent to the plans of people who had mistaken its silence for absence. I have a question, the Crestfall Beta said, looking up from the journal. His voice had changed. The careful official neutrality was still present, but it had shifted. The way the tone of a person asking a question shifts when they already know the answer and are offering the other party a chance to confirm it themselves. He looked at Saran, the exile notation on the Ashveil record for this woman. Who signed it? Saran said nothing. Beta Saran, the Crestfall Beta said, with the patience of a man who had asked a question and intended to receive an answer. The exile notation. Who signed it? It was a standard elder review process. Who signed it? The assembly ground held its silence. Behind Zara, the settlement wolves stood steady and still, and the cold air moved between them all, and the rogue lands breathed in their ancient dark beyond the walls. I countersigned it, Saran said, as is standard procedure for exile rulings requiring beta validation. And the original signature? A pause, so brief most people would have missed it. Elder Kale. Elder Kale, the Crestfall Beta repeated. Who is, I believe, your father-in-law? The silence that followed was of a different quality than anything that had come before it. It was the silence of a thing being seen clearly by everyone present for the first time. Not the silence of shock. The coalition wolves had not known the connection. That was clear from the Dusmore Babita's expression, but the silence of understanding arriving with the specific weight of a thing that reorders everything around it. Zara looked at Saran. He was looking back at her, and for the first time since the Great Hall, since his face in the crowd, the practiced reasonableness was gone. Not the fear beneath it, the fear was still there, but the performance that had covered it. Stripped away cleanly, the way a wind strips away something that was never fixed to begin with. She had waited 23 years for a pack to see her clearly. She had not imagined it would feel like this. Not triumph, not quite, something quieter. The specific relief of a truth that had been underground a long time finally breaking the surface and breathing. The arbitration grounds are not sustained, the Crestfall Beta said. He spoke with the formal evenness of official procedure, but his eyes, when they moved to Saran, carried something that procedure did not cover. The exile ruling contains a clear conflict of interest, a documented precedent of bloodline suppression, and evidence of deliberate historical misrepresentation. Under interpack law, the ruling is invalid. He paused. Furthermore, the evidence presented indicates that the original territorial claim, predating Ashveil's current holding, belongs to the Luna bloodline of the Roguelands. I will be making a formal recommendation to the Interpack Council that a full review of the Ash Eastern border be conducted. Saran stood very still. Beta Saran, the Dunmore Beta said, and her voice carried the specific coldness of a woman who had come here in good faith and was not pleased to discover the faith had been misplaced. You will understand that the Dunmore pack withdraws from the coalition immediately, and that Alpha Dunmore will be informed of the full circumstances of our presence here today. The Crestfall Beta nodded once. As will Alpha Crestfall. Saran looked at Zara for a long moment. Something moved through his face. Complex, layered, the expression of a man processing the specific failure of a careful plan, and finding beneath the failure something he had not accounted for. Not her strategy, she thought, not the parchment, not the journal, not the coalition dissolution. Her, the fact of her. Standing here unhurried, with the rogue lands behind her and both of their alphas on either side of her, and 4 generations of suppressed truth finally given the room to breathe. He turned and left the assembly ground without speaking. His 14 wolves followed. The coalition witnesses followed, separately, with the particular distance of people who had been used without consent and were communicating that distance through the geometry of their departure. The gate closed. The settlement did not erupt. That was not who they were. These were not people who had survived the rogue lands by erupting. What happened instead was slower and more real. A collective exhale, a shift in posture across every wolf in the assembly ground, the specific physical release of a tension that had been held at ready since dawn. Davin materialized at Zara's left side with the timing of a woman who had been exactly where she needed to be, waiting for exactly this moment. She said nothing. She simply stood there, which was precisely the right thing. Caius turned to face the settlement. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to, and the assembly ground went fully quiet. Saran will regroup, he said. He won't stop. Careful men don't stop. but he's lost his coalition and his legal grounds, and the next move he makes will be from a weakened position, in full view of Pax, who now have reason to watch him carefully. He let that sit for a moment. We prepare for his next attempt as we have prepared for everything, together. A sound moved through the settlement wolves, not a cheer, not quite. More like the sound of agreement finding its voice. Affirmation without theater. Then Caius looked at Zara, and Rarest moved to stand beside him, and the two of them looked at her with expressions that were different in their surfaces and identical in their depth, the still lake and the running river, both of them carrying the same current. "There's something else," Caius said quietly for the three of them. "Something that should have happened before today, that we should have said before the gate, before the assembly." He paused. "The land chose you, we choose you. And there's a word for what you are to this territory and to us, and it's past time we said it where the settlement could hear." Rael turned to face the assembled wolves. When he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of an alpha addressing his people, not loud, but with a resonance that moved through the assembly ground and reached every wolf present without effort. "The roguelands have a Luna," he said. The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of something long expected, finally spoken aloud. The kind of silence that precedes not shock but recognition. Caius reached into his coat and produced the silver-white bonding cord. Mira's cord, the one Davon had kept in the wooden box for 60 years. Zara looked at it and felt something move in her chest that was not the warmth she had been receiving carefully for 2 days. It was larger than that. Older. "This requires your choice," Rael said to her, quietly for her alone. "Not the land's, not ours, yours." She looked at them both. Caius, with the cord in his hands and the banked fire in his eyes, turned gentle. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly gentle, without the operational focus, without the performance, simply Caius choosing to let her see him clearly. And Rael, with the ice water, gray, entirely still and entirely open, the armor set aside in the specific way of someone who has decided that a moment is worth the risk of being seen. She thought about Mira's journal. Understanding a thing and surviving it are not the same. She thought about Sorel 4 generations back, and the ink line running forward through time. She thought about a coin pressed against a wound. She sees you. She has not forgotten you. "Yes," Zara said. It was not a complicated word. It did not need to be. Caius held out the cord. She took one end, Rael took the other. And Caius, with a care that was entirely at odds with the speed he brought to everything else, wound the silver-white thread around the three of them. 1 loop, 2 loops. The old knots finding their positions as if the cord remembered what it was made for. Around them, the rogueland settlement bore witness, not as subjects observe a ceremony. As a people observe the arrival of something they have been building toward without a name for it, and are finally able to name. When the cord was bound, Caius looked at the assembled wolves. He did not speak for a moment, letting the image stand on its own, the way a true thing sometimes only needs to be seen. "Our Luna," he said. And the rogue lands, ancient and borderless and patient beyond the walls, received it. Not as news, as completion. Later, much later, when the settlement had returned to its ordinary life, with the particular ease of people who had absorbed something large and were now building it into their daily architecture, Zara stood at the eastern wall alone. The tree line was quiet. The fire from the night before was long cold. The sky above the rogue lands was moving toward evening in long bands of amber and gray, the light falling through the canopy the way it only fell in old places, slowly as if it had earned the right to take its time. She had Mira's journal in her hands. She opened it to the last written page. The handwriting was the same small, careful script throughout, but on this final entry it was slightly different. Not rushed, not afraid. Something else. The particular quality of a person writing something they want to last. "I have done what I could with the time I had. I have left the cord and the record and this journal for whoever comes after me, because I believe someone will come. The land does not build something this carefully and then abandon it. I have learned that at least. Whatever I could not finish, she will finish. I am not afraid of that. I am glad of it. I hope she is happy here. I hope the land is kind to her. I hope the wolves who find her are worthy of what she is. I hope she lets herself be found." Zara closed the journal. She looked out over the rogue lands. Her lands now, ancient and dark and alive with the specific life of a place that had been waiting for its completion. She thought about the border she had crossed 2 nights ago, bleeding and barefoot, and holding the last remnant of a faith she had nearly finished losing. She thought about the cold dark and the breathing that had not been animal and not been wind, and what it had actually been. Recognition, old and patient and entirely certain. She heard them before she heard them, the particular quality of footsteps she had already learned to distinguish, the way you learn quickly to distinguish things that matter. Caius first, present and immediate, then Rael, one beat behind, deliberate. They came to stand beside her at the wall, one on each side. The arrangement that had, she understood, already become their natural geometry. The 3 of them finding the shape that fit without having agreed on it. "He's regrouping," Rael said of Saren. Not alarmed, simply factual. "Good," Zara said. Caius glanced at her. "Good? A man regrouping is a man making decisions. Decisions leave traces." She looked out at the tree line. "We'll see the next move before it arrives." Caius was quiet for a moment, then, "You know, when I found you at the river, you didn't find me," Rael said. "I found the situation. I found her at the river. You found her in the settlement. I found her in the healing house, which is an entirely different thing and is, frankly, the more significant." "It is not more significant." Zara looked from one to the other with the she was discovering was becoming her default in these moments, caught between laughter and the specific warmth of people who were showing her, without trying to show her, what ordinary life between the 3 of them was going to look like. "I was going to say," Caius said, with dignity, "that when I encountered you in the relevant location, I did not expect you to still be here 2 days later, having dismantled a 6-month coalition strategy before noon." "Were you hoping I'd leave?" she said. "I was hoping," he said with the honesty that was his most disarming quality, "that you'd stay. I didn't expect it to happen this fast." He paused. "I didn't expect you to be this, you." Zara looked at him. "Is that a compliment?" "It's the highest one I have," he said simply. The evening light moved across the rogue lands in its slow old way, unhurried, taking its time. The settlement behind them breathed its ordinary evening rhythm. Cook fires, children. The argument about curing hide which had apparently resumed with renewed energy. Rael said nothing for a long while, then, in the particular way of a man who had chosen his moment, "Welcome home," he said. Zara looked out at the dark old land that had breathed her name into the cold before she knew its own, that had kept a cord and a journal and a promise across 4 generations and 60 years, that had waited with the patience of something that understood waiting as a form of certainty rather than loss. She felt the warmth in her chest, full and unconditional and entirely without fine print. She let it stay. "Thank you," she said. And the rogue lands held them, all 3, in the amber and gray of an evening that had waited a very long time to arrive. If you made it this far, thank you. Truly, a comment or a like helps more people find these stories, and that's how this little community grows. I read every single thought that you comment, and I'm looking forward to it. See you in the next story. I love you all, Saya.